I am Jacquelyn Melinek. I'm the founder and CEO of Token Relations. We do a weekly newsletter on Polygon. You guys should all read it, check it out. But more importantly, I am joined here today with Will Duran, the co-CEO of Mintio. We have Christian, the founder of Lidio. And then we have Efrain Barraza, the LATAM lead at Tether. Hey guys, how are you feeling? Excited to talk stablecoins today? Yeah, mic test, mic test.
Wait.
Yeah.
Trying?
Hello.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear all of you guys now. Awesome. All right, let's start talking about everyone's favorite topic right now, stablecoins. It is probably the biggest narrative of the past 12 to 18 months. Tether is the world's largest stablecoin, so I'm sure you've got lots to say over there. But essentially, it's kind of becoming this like backbone of on-chain finance, payments, DeFi, all these different areas. To kind of lay the land, how do you think about the state of stablecoins today? Are you guys happy with it? Do you feel like we're in the early days? Where are we? Go
Want me
ahead.
to start? Okay, hey everybody. Yeah, so I'm the CEO of Lidio, and we've been foreseeing this wave for the past 8 years. My previous startup, we did remittances from Colombia to Venezuela. We tried to dollarize Venezuela back in 2018, 2020, but it was a timing thing where that's why we didn't succeed. But with Lidio, basically we're building a global account where every person in their day-to-day, they can spend, they can invest, they can basically transact, have an account in the US, building like this stablecoin banking trend that we are seeing right now, but we've been foreseeing it in the past, 5 to 6 years. So regarding on what's happening with stablecoins in this moment, I think there's a lot, like the industry is pretty hot, but the key for us and what we've always seen is stablecoins is just like the vehicle. So the seamless adoption for the users is something that's the most important thing for stablecoins, because people, they don't want crypto. They just need to solve the problems. And stablecoins have been that vehicle where basically people can send cheaper, faster, they can access to strong currencies and more in emerging markets. We operate in Colombia, Peru, Chile, Mexico, Argentina. And this is a strong problem that happens as well in LATAM, in Africa. Everybody I think here knows it. But it's the seamless adoption, the key. Because when people, they want to spend, they don't care if it's a stable coin. They just want to buy, like they just want to do a transaction without high fees. They want to hedge from devaluation. They want to generate yield. So the key and what we've seen is basically in how people are adopting it seamlessly, and that's what we've been building towards in the past 4 years with Lidio.
Hi guys, my name is William, founder of Mintio. We're a stablecoin issuer for Latin America. So basically we issue the Colombian peso on chain. We just launched the Brazilian real. I guess my answer to the question would be that it's been interesting to see sort of the evolution of stablecoins over the last couple of years, right? I think in many ways it all sort of kicked off with USDT, with Bitfinex, right? It really was this sort of asset that allowed money to stay on chain. I think it's been interesting the last couple of years how that's evolved to really become sort of this asset to transact, right? And I think probably when USDT came out, I don't think that was even something that they thought about, like, oh, this is going to become this massive thing, but rather they was trying to solve a problem, right? And I think what we're seeing now is that we're seeing the tokenization of assets come on chain, which essentially means we need to have sort of like this assets to be able to move value. And I think that's what we've seen, at least from a local issuance perspective, which is, it's if the dollar is on chain, I think it makes sense that a lot of these other, currencies come on chain as well, and that's what Mintio is trying to do from our end. So that's how I actually have seen that evolution, and I think now there's going to be a lot of companies building using these sort of like on-chain rails.
Hi guys, Efrain. It's easier than Efrain, to be honest. Expansion manager for Latin America, Tether. So Tether is a Bitcoin first company, right? And being in the space for the last 10 years and saw a lot of evangelists trying to educate people on Bitcoin and blockchain technology, for us, USDT became an easier way to educate by using the necessity of people to save in dollars, to understand the technology, and also to jump into other forms of cryptocurrencies. So I think it's needed in my opinion. It's the backbone for a whole ecosystem. It created an industry on its own. What it's lacking, in my opinion, is a bit more abstraction, which is, obviously, it goes against the philosophy, but it needs a bit more abstraction in the solutions to be completely ubiquitous. That's the thing.
Yeah. Given that you all have kind of a unique angle within the Latin American region, how do you kind of think about expansion from stablecoins being, you know, a niche asset within the crypto space to actually having utility in people's day-to-day lives?
Yeah, so I'll come back maybe a couple of years ago where stablecoins, Tether, for example, it was the main asset to do trading, for example, in exchanges. That's how you guys won a lot of market cap. But nowadays, the real adoption comes from the day-to-day usage. You spending with a MasterCard or with Visa, for example, we offer that. You saving, you being able to transact easily. So the key is basically adopting it into the real world problems. And that's what we've been seeing, me as a founder for the past 8 years, where remittances were broken. They're too expensive. Having up to 15% fees, sending cross-border payments, that's absurd. And as well, when you basically are trying to use your dollars, like my parents, for example, 30 years ago, they were just stashing dollars in their bed because there was no easy access for you to have a USD bank account or a Euro account. And basically, stablecoins have been like adopting and giving that financial access to the people. So that's what I see in like how we should be thinking more in the user's problem and less in the technology, because the technology is the enabler. So we already have it there. How can we build the experience towards what the users really need? And with that, basically building and transforming the traditional financial products into more like the blockchain and stablecoin powered products, which are going to be much more efficient, easier, faster, and basically better for the users. Just a fundamental thing from our view in Lithium. That's why we basically have been building everything towards converting all the traditional financial products into stablecoin products so that any user can use them.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, I agree with Christian. I think at the end of the day, it's about usability, right? So, but in many ways, it's also about technology. So I think if you go back a couple of years ago, probably the technology wasn't good enough for certain use cases, right? If you look at payments, even the blockchains were okay. I mean, I remember the DeFi summer and also the NFT craze, and it was just like, it was absolutely ridiculous that you'd be paying, $300, $400 gas fees for a transaction. But I think that was sort of like the state of technology then, and I think at first with new technologies, a lot of it's always a lot about hype at first. I think what we're seeing now is that there's different players solving a different problem in the stack, right? So like for us as an issuer, we try to solve a lot of the infrastructure issues around on-ramp, off-ramp, trust. If you look at Litio, for example, they try to solve a lot around the user experience, right? Named accounts, being able to access basically like a global bank or like a global account. So I think at the end of the day, it's about understanding that, while we still have certain limitations as an industry, if we all sort of like focus on solving specific problems for users, I think that's gonna take the adoption to become much more mainstream.
Yeah, I agree. No, what I can add there is basically with this technology, there's like a click factor where the moment you understand this is much better than the traditional financial system to send money abroad, basically. So for me, at least, was comparing one to the other and not coming back never again. And I think that level of, or that situation for most users is when we gain that moment in which we can basically connect the traditional financial system with this new financial system to allow people easily to understand that this is much better than the process.
Kind of to your point before about your parents stashing money under the bed, do they use stablecoins now?
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah, because I was going to say, like, abstracting away the crypto complexity of all this is kind of like the key objective. Because in order to get everyone to adopt it, you don't want them all to be sitting in an Ethereum conference in order to understand how to use it. You just want them to be able to like log on and transact, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to add something there, which is actually a cool story, which is same thing with my mother. She honestly, I think she's just starting to understand what I do, but the first time she really understood what I did was actually at a taco shop in Bogota, in Colombia. And then, Litio is we're partners, right? So we're, they're clients of ours, and I took out the Litio card and I paid, I told her like, hey, like pay for the food. And to her it was like, oh wow, like I understand now how you guys work with them, because then she saw the settlement on like, on COPM. And that's why, my previous point was like, you need to build on the different levels of the stack, right? Like for us, we're building on the infrastructure layer, but if you also don't have that application layer, it's very hard for these things to come mainstream. So that's why it's a good story.
That's a good testimonial for you. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we have scaled to hundreds of thousands of users in the past 4 years. And the strategy, I remember when we started back in 2021, 2022, it was we could have done a like decentralized wallet, or giving the people to own their keys, or going with crypto. And some competitors, they started as like full crypto native, but we understood that the users are the common people. Like if there's a crypto user, it's a really small niche, a 0.5% of the population. If we really want to scale a seamless adoption in crypto and generate volume, we have to get to the end user. And how did we do it? It was full focus in user experience, so that even your mother or my mother, that she's 65 years old, she's super tech ignorant. She would hate me if she hears me, but basically it's how they can use it in their day-to-day without needing to understand what's blockchain. It's like pretty similar to the internet 30 years ago. Like not many people understand how the internet works from the infrastructure perspective. They just use it every day in their phones, in their meetings and everything. I think stablecoins, the key of that is giving the product to the user so that they can basically solve their problems. Sorry if I'm being repetitive, but that's what we focus and we've been obsessed with in the past couple of years. And that basically has made us build the card so that anybody can buy something, have an ACH account in the US so that they can transact, bring their salary or do a remittance or whatever. And that's how we basically keep on developing. I think that's the key for stablecoin adoption in the short term, but I think Efrain can tell us more.
I agree, but I'm trying to go back to the philosophy, basically. So I understand it's the first step, but it would be awesome if many people, even your mother, 65 years old, mine, 70, right? At least understand not how blockchain technically works, but that they can check, basically, and they don't have to trust a company, and they can trust directly in math and in the public infrastructure. That's why we recently launched the wallet development kit from Tether, which basically allows anyone, it's open source, anyone to basically download it and start creating on-chain wallets for everyone.
Is it better to exist as like an invisible layer where they don't really know what they're using, it just makes their lives easier, or should they be learning and understanding what this technology is, hopefully meeting them where they're at?
I mean, the good question is like, how many people know, like what JavaScript is, what language, Instagram uses, this type of thing. So I honestly, I don't think so. I don't think you need that for mass adoption. I think you need to understand sort of like major bullet points around what it solves and what it does. But I think at the end of the day, the world is so complex that like, it's very hard to understand how everything works, right? Like so I just think you need to be able to push forward like the use cases, and then it sort of clicks in people's minds, and I think that's really how you drive that type of adoption.
But it's like we know what dollars are, but I don't need to know like how my credit card transacts or like settles. I just know that it works, right? So would stablecoins be comparable to like everyday currencies that we use?
It's a tricky question, because even if you know what a dollar is, you're trusting the issuer, right? And the issuer in this case, well, it's the Federal Reserve. In Argentina, it's a central bank. But in this case, we are a private company. So you will have to rely on us as a private company to secure those assets. So I'm not saying that we are not, but again, we are still a private company, so it's centralized. Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be the invisible layer, but for sure, based on the premise that everyone should be self-custodian, you should be understanding exactly who is behind whatever you are using to transact.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the word trust, and that's the most important thing for you building a fintech, and more in emerging economies where there's been a lot of scams in crypto. So understanding basically that there is a stronger fundamental infrastructure than the traditional financial system. Like if you see Swift, for example, like everybody has used a Swift transaction, but I'm sure less than 1% of the people understand how it works, and it's like something that's been there for decades and super inefficient. That's why it's slow. That's why it's expensive. So understanding like the fundamental thing that's more technical, it's just like how you can leverage on the infra layer into making much better products, 10x, 100x better products, which is happening now. So I think for a user, if he understand that, hey, I don't have to pay 15% on a cross-border payment, I just will have to pay 1% or 0.5%, and I trust the brand, that's why trust is super important, there's going to be the mass adoption, and there's going to be a really fast switch of usage from incumbents to new companies like Litio or any other like similar companies that are uprising, Felix Pago, etc. So, and that's why we've been growing as well so fast. So we have always tried to be super transparent with our users, to explaining them it's like, okay, it's a digital dollar, it's not the fiat dollar, but it's just like a digital dollar is a digitalization of the fiat dollar, and it's backed up. So we've done a lot of education, but the users, they really don't care. It's like, okay, I can spend my dollars, I can put them and generate yield. So yeah, it's difficult to say, but I think it's the users don't care. They just care about cheaper, faster, and better products.
So obviously education and trust are really important here, and they're probably still like a bit of a hurdle for some people, because maybe they don't trust it, maybe they don't know enough about it. But what are other kind of hurdles or challenges that each of you are trying to overcome in order to make this more of like a daily thing that people interact with?
I think so assuming we are in the first step, which we are basically trying to promote the usage of stable coins through centralized parties, right? Centralized wallets, etc. I think a big responsibility relies on the regulation. If a regulation is bad, like for example Europe, basically it erodes every innovation that you can achieve with the solution. But that's, yeah, besides education, I think that's the biggest problem.
I mean, I would echo what Christian said earlier. I think trust, right? I mean, trust continues to be, even though I think we've advanced a lot in the last couple of years as a whole in the industry, I think trust is still the main one, right? Trust from banks, trust from consumers. So I think at the end of the day, the way you get trust is a little bit what Efrain said. I mean, I think at the end of the day, regulation does give this clarity to banks and to institutions, even to people, to feel more comfortable sort of like navigating these assets. And then on the other side, I think user experience, right? I think if you have sort of like clear regulation and you have an improvement in user experience, you really do get to this sort of like mass adoption. But for us, I think a lot of it is still continuing to build trust with like the major stakeholders in the space.
You agree with them? Yeah, I thought so. Okay, maybe on the positive side of things then, how do you think about what's really working well today? Because obviously something's working well, stablecoins are growing, the adoption's massive. I talked about this at the beginning of this panel, saying like it is the hottest narrative right now, and for good reason. I think people are starting to see the value of it, but is there a specific area, whether it's like payments, remittances, something within DeFi, whatever it may be, you might all have different answers, but where are you seeing the most traction and success today?
I think it's a compounded effect for the past couple of years. Companies like Tether, Minteo, they have been able to basically offer and connect the rails and provide liquidity. I think that's something super important. globally and as well locally. So I think of timing is like if Litio would have been born 10 years ago, it wouldn't have been possible. So there's a compound effect between the companies that have been already been explaining to authorities, so that the compliance part, I think, is as well a crucial part that, for example, yeah, in Latam, in Colombia, for example, compliance is still, we do it as if we were a traditional bank and we have a super high standard of compliance, even though a company like Litio is not a financial institution, we're just a digital asset marketplace. So I think as well that the companies like us, that we go more than expected from the law, is where we basically generate that offer confidence from the central bank in Colombia, from the different institutions, and that's how we've been basically been showing up that founders like us, we are up to building something with crypto. There comes like the success comes from the experience, because that makes, like, if we have the trust of the government, we're able to launch on scale. That's the most important thing. So building an experience where everybody understands, my mother, your mother, everybody, that's the key part, and how people basically are going to adopt pretty fast. And not only for a stablecoin banking, but as well for remittances, for investments. We see real world assets are going to be all tokenized in the next couple of years. So as well leveraging into that so that you can jump in and jump out. And that's all going to be basically experience, because right now it's too difficult. Like if you want to invest in the US, for example, in Interactive Brokers, you'll take like up to 6 months opening your account. Like if you have a wallet connected to any kind of stock market, you'll be able to basically invest instantly. So, and that's everything experience. So the success, for example, in Litio, and one of our mods, is how we've been building everything and connecting to DeFi and to all the protocols, and bringing it for somebody that is 10 years or 65, 70 years old and can use it seamlessly with 3 clicks. So I think that's one of the key success parts, with the trust and the compliance, because otherwise it would have been very difficult to scale, not being a decentralized company. So that's from my side.
I would say that there's like a couple of things that have gone well, in the last year or so. I think one, obviously, regulatory clarity in the U.S. around the Genius Act and these type of things, I think, really sort of like shakes the market in a way that's positive, right? You look at now, VASP licensing coming out in Brazil, and I think what this means that there's like this, movement towards like mainstream adoption, right? And I think regulation unlocks a lot of that. So I would say, that's one of the big things this year is sort of like that unlock of regulatory clarity. The second one, I would say, use cases around cross-border payments, I think is a big one, right? I think for many years, crypto in many ways has been trying to find its feet around sustainable, large use cases. We've always had use cases, right? But it's always been sort of like specific use cases that cater to a specific niche of people. I think cross-border is something that we've seen that unlocks entire regions around the world, right? You look at Africa, you look at Southeast Asia, you look at Latin America, and all of a sudden you realize like there's a lot of efficiencies that can be solved through stablecoins, right? So it's this type of thing where like, okay, now we have a little bit more regulatory clarity and a regulatory push from the US that has this sort of like drop-down effect. Now you have, all these companies going into payments and using stablecoins to solve payment issues globally, and then all of a sudden it starts to feel like there's real movement, there's real things happening, and I think that's just going to lead to more unlocks, in different verticals over the next couple months. So I would say those are sort of like the things that to me are most interesting in the last couple months.
Yeah, I agree. I think I think the more and more business models become online, right, and internet native, it's logic that you start using internet money, right? It's a matter of time. That's it. But yeah, for sure. And I personally thank the pandemic also, because we were not going to be here without the pandemic. The pandemic created basically that a lot of people start moving online for all their businesses, and that created a huge demand for stablecoins, for sure.
From your experiences in Latin America, is there any specific types of adoption that you've seen that are extremely unique to this region opposed to other ones, like Latin America, South America, etc.?
Yeah, so I think there's a, so like, okay, I mentioned cross-border. Cross-border is, obviously sort of like a worldwide use case, but I think one of the things that we found interesting in LATAM is that obviously each country has very specific needs, right? So I'll use the example of Colombia because that's the first market that we launched in, and I think we sort of went in thinking, okay, we're gonna do like on-chain FX, but over the last couple of months, we've been evolving that vision, and like one of the things that we realized is that, for example, local payments, treasury management, these type of things are big use cases too, because for example, Colombia, we have like ACH payments, right? There's no real-time payments. Just now, there's starting to be, this sort of launch of a real-time payment system, but it's still in its infancy, and there's still things that use cases and business cases that it doesn't fully cover. So I think it is interesting because you start seeing that depending on the country, there might or might not be specific needs. So in Colombia, definitely I think local payments and local treasury management is a big one. Brazil, probably not so much, right? They have PIX, so local payments just feels a little bit far-fetched. So I think that's why it's sort of difficult to generalize LATAM as a whole, because it does feel like a region. We all speak the same language apart from Brazil, but at the end of the day, each country has very different sets of regulation, of compliance, culture, payment rails. So I think that's why it's so hard to sort of like standardize this type of things.
Yeah. So, in my take is like, yeah, everybody sees LATAM as like one region, but every country has its own things, like Will was saying. So, I've seen like I'm going in, trying to figure out what's the best go-to market for each of the different countries, what countries to go. I've been analyzing pretty deep Latin America. So I see a different split. So Central America, obviously cross-border payments, close to 30% of the GDP of some countries come from remittances. So that's a perfect product where you can launch. There are countries, for example, like Ecuador or Brazil, where when you are spending with your local card in an international and do an international transaction, you'll get fees up to 5 to 10%, and that's absurd. So as well, the way how you spend, but as well, for example, Venezuela, Argentina, Colombia, where people just saw the dollar as a store of value or a stronger fiat, euro, dollar, is where people as well start saving. Obviously, it's a mix because they overlap and all the countries suffer similar things because of the geopolitical conflicts, the macroeconomical trends, everything that's been happening for the past decades, and it's not getting any better. So, but we see the whole time shifts. So right now in some countries there's the extreme left, in ours is the extreme right, and it will be changing like over the period. So there are many opportunities, and what we see is like those are tailwinds. A lot of uncertainty, a lot of devaluation, a lot of opportunities, and that's why it's the sweet spot where stable coins in the world are more adopting. And that's why LATAM is the strongest market. But you have to understand, like, okay, what's Bolivia's take? What's the problems that they're facing? What are the regulations? Like July of last year, there was a regulation that left that permitted the banks to use crypto in Bolivia, and that's why there are many companies, Takenos, Meru, launching in Bolivia and getting a lot of adoption. So I think everything's evolving pretty fast. You have to be like understanding the market and knowing that the same product that works in Colombia might not work in Paraguay, in Argentina, and being like super flexible. But the whole suite of products, people spending, saving, investing, and transacting, sending money, like everybody needs it. The question is how you get into market.
What advice would you give builders that are looking to build products or something within the stablecoin economy right now?
Go with one.
Yeah, so I would say, I think there's still a lot of sort of like consumer products that need to be built. There's a lot. Basically, there's one of the ways that we think about this is like there's a lot of infrastructure that's already sort of in place, right? So if you look at, for example, I don't know, BitGo, and you look at Tether, and you look at Mintio with local stablecoins, you look at rain cards, you look at all these different things. It's actually quite cool because right now you could literally, put some of these pieces together and sort of have like a neobank, right? Which is kind of crazy to think about 10 years ago that you'd be able to do these type of things. And that's just like one example, right? But there's so many different types of products. Credit products, lending products. We actually have a term in Mintio that we use, which is FinChain, which is like, fintechs building on on-chain infrastructure. And I think that's sort of like what it alludes to. It's that there's just so many on-chain capabilities now that we can use to really bring a better user experience. Like we've always thought about the fact that there's just not enough financial products in LATAM. Like if you look at the US, you have a bunch of things. You have like, Robinhood and Coinbase, and it's been like that for many years. That's not really been the case in LATAM, where we basically have like Nubank. And I think it's because of the complexity of building financial products, which I think should change with all this sort of like new tooling that we have at our disposal.
I would say there's still a lot of room to grow this industry, right? Because basically we are challenging the traditional financial system and all their products. So I think focus on what's the problem you want to solve first, and try to focus the product that way and see if it fits, and then the rest is just history, because this industry goes up and down, up and down, up and down. When it's up and you're ready to launch, it's going to be easy.
Yeah, from my perspective is like in the past 4 years, we've been the design partners for many companies. For example, Bridge, with Polygon we've worked a lot as well, with Stellar, Avalanche, with Minteo we are also design partners. We understand pretty well, and they have been solving our needs. So people who want to start building, I think the two main things for now is, one, local rails. Having directly, that's what I was telling you before the panel, is having the way into how you can connect locally instantly, easier, is something that I think is a huge opportunity, because there's no global partner that has all the railways. So for us, it has been pretty difficult to understand, okay, if we integrate this partner, then we're going to let the other countries away, and I think that's a huge opportunity. And the other one as well is yield generation, and how people and companies can as well have a secure way. We use open trade, they're our partners, and they're great partners. I think there's still a huge opportunity there in the market, even though they're creating great solutions. But I think those would be two interesting things with all the wave of companies that are uprising with stablecoins.
Amazing. Well, thank you to our panelists for all the wonderful insights, and thank you to everyone for listening in.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.